The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of paltalk.com, AVM software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users. On demand on iTunes and on demand on YouTube. And on Gary's blog, www.garybaumgarten.com, where you are invited to comment whether you agree with Gary or not. And thanks to our friends on CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated coast to coast across the United States to 12 million additional households. I'm your fill-in host, Boaz Frankel. That's right, folks. Gary Baumgarten is en route to Detroit. Correct, Anna? Now, he said that he may be with us for a visit if his air card works. I don't know. I wouldn't count on it. But we'll see what happens in the next 20 minutes. If he arrives, he arrives. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Anyway, folks, interesting topic this evening. Unrest is rising in Mexico over a drug war, and it's spilling over into the United States. The U.S. news media has suddenly wakened to the news of the multi-front drug cartel war. Kidnappings are rampant not only in Mexico City, but in Phoenix as well. U.S. border guards are not just interdicting the flow of contraband into the United States, but also the smuggling of guns, ammunition, and money out of the United States into Mexico. Some of the violence involves rival cartels, but some of it, south of the border, is the result of conflicts between the government and cartels. Some of it, legitimate attempts to control the drugs, but some of it is reflective of corrupt government and police officials and personnel working against one cartel on behalf of another. Joining us on News Talk Online on paltalk.com today to discuss this complex issue and how U.S. government policy addressing it is contradictory is Laura Carlson, Director of the Americas Policy Program at the Center for International Policy based in Mexico City. Carlson has published numerous articles and chapters on the social, economic, and political aspects of Mexico. Laura Carlson, welcome to News Talk Online on paltalk.com.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
It's great to have you here, Laura. We have a serious problem, Laura. I mean, we've had a serious problem with this drug problem in Mexico and coming in from Mexico to the United States and from the United States going out to Mexico. But this has been going on for a very long time, and only in the last, I would say, in the last year or so, the media has been more hype about it. Why is that? Why are we only hearing about this now?
Well, there are two things that happened there. The drug trade, of course, has been going on for a very long time. It's a transnational trade, and it underwent some changes from particularly the actions that were taking place in Colombia. What happened was that before, Mexico was primarily a transit route for Colombian cocaine with some production of poppies for heroin and marijuana, but on kind of a minimal level. Mostly it was one of many transit routes. Then what happened is with the crackdown, it became much less easy to route Colombian cocaine through the Caribbean, and Mexico became the transit route. And then when they broke up some of those mega cartels in Colombia and they fractured into smaller cartels, one of the changes that happened was that Mexico took a much more prominent role in not only trafficking but selling and distributing in the United States. And they also began to pay them, instead of in money, to pay them in kind, so that much of the drug was coming through Mexico and it was staying in Mexico to begin to create a market here. So when we had the beginnings of a market in Mexico, They were no longer just fighting for drug routes, but also fighting for markets and for certain kinds of territory. And into that climate and those changes that I've just described, President Felipe Calderón became president in very questioned elections in the year 2006. And since his legitimacy as president was questioned, he won by 0.5 percentage point, and about half the Mexican population didn't even believe that he had actually won the popular vote because they refused to do a recount, and there were accusations of fraud. He did what other presidents have done before him, which is to impose this drug war model in an effort to strengthen the presidency. When that happened, it meant that the whole drug war was interpreted basically as this war on the drug cartels and their power that was very heavily focused on a military and police approach and focused on enforcement and interdiction. This is only one of many ways to approach a drug problem. They pretty much abandoned the public health perspective of rehabilitation and prevention and began to engage in these conflicts in the streets with the drug cartels. 45,000 Army troops were sent out into the streets of Mexico, which is kind of unprecedented, that the Army be used in a domestic battle that way. And we had what we've seen, an explosion of violence, without to date having any significant impact or measurable impact on the power of the drug cartels.
That's quite an opening as to what's happening in Mexico. Interesting that the Mexican army being 45,000 Mexican troops being used within Mexican borders. I don't really know what the government laws there are with regards to using their federal troops on their territory. I know that here in the United States, I believe there's a law saying that we can't use federal troops within the boundaries of the United States of America. The difference, just one of the differences between the two, which leads me to my next question. How feasible is it for the United States of America, given that, let's say that our National Guard would not be enough to strengthen the security along the Mexican-American border, how feasible would it be, and would the American government take a unprecedented step in changing the law and actually using federal troops along the Mexican border?
I don't think the United States government is going to use federal troops within its own territory to a degree because of that very strong rule against it. In fact, in Mexico, there's a lot of controversy about whether the Constitution here permits it either. In effect, the Constitution is supposed to set up the Army, as in other countries, as a force that protects the country against external threats and is sometimes used for natural disasters. So there's still a lot of controversy